in for a licking?
You bet. We're gonna smear him.
Yeah, but 10 against 1. That's not very fair.
Ah, come on. Come on.
What's it all about?
None of your business.
Scared to tell me?
No, I'm not as scared. I'll fight you even.
Not if I can help it. I just want to know why the gang war.
We don't like him. We don't want him in our neighborhood or going to our school.
I've been living here as long as you.
What's he got, smallpox or something?
We don't like his religion.
His religion?
Look, mister, he's a dirt...
Now, hold on. I see what you mean. You must be a bunch of those Nazi werewolves I've been reading about.
Mister, are you screwy?
Not me. I'm an American.
Well, what do you think we are?
Nazis?
Don't call me a Nazi. My father's a sergeant in the army. He been wounded even.
Wounded, huh? Say, I bet he got some of that blood plasma.
He was wounded so bad he had to get it 3 times.
Son, anybody in your family ever go to the blood bank?
Sure, my mother and my father both.
Uh-huh. You know what? I bet you maybe his pop's blood helped save your dad's life. That's bad.
What's bad about it?
Well, don't you see? Your father doesn't go to the same church as his father does. That's awful. Do you think maybe if your father knew about it in time, he would rather have died than to take blood from a man of another religion? Would you have wanted him to die? Would your mom want him to die?
No.
Look, fellas, religion makes no difference, except maybe to a Nazi or somebody as stupid. Why, people all over the world worship God in many different ways. God created everybody. He didn't create one people better than another. Your blood's the same as mine. Mine's the same as his. Do you know what this wonderful country is made of? It's made up of 100 different kind of people, and 100 different ways of talking, and 100 different ways of going to church. But they're all American ways. Wouldn't we be silly if we went around hating people because they comb their hair different than ours? Wouldn't we be a lot of dopes? My dad came from Italy, but I'm an American. But should I hate your father because he came from Ireland or France or Russia? Wouldn't I be a first-class fathead? You guys remember Pearl Harbor? Why, the Japs socked us so it looked like we could never do anything about it. But a couple of days later, something very important happened. Close your eyes and let me tell you about it. Go on, close your eyes. All of you, I want you to imagine.
Scene 2144A.
Sir, at the time that you first found out about the atomic bomb, did you regard it as a curse or a blessing to mankind?
Well, I thought it was a blessing. I thought it could be used and made a blessing. I never worried about it being a curse. I wanted a weapon that would win the war, and it did. That's what I was interested in.
The United Nations was already in the process of being formed at that time. And with the atomic bomb in our exclusive possession, what were our chances of preventing another war?
The United Nations was called to meet on the 16th, I think, of July in San Francisco. And the first decision I had to make after I became President of the United States, the newspaper men came in and asked me if the United Nations meeting would take place. The United Nations meeting did take place, and I went to San Francisco and set them to work.
Did it seem to you that the demonstration of the bomb to put an end to the horrible war might give humanity a good chance of really being frightened to death, and that such overwhelming fear would become the compellent deterrent to war?
No, I never had any such feeling at all. I always thought of that as a weapon of war, and as a weapon that was powerful enough to win that war. After we made the demonstration of it in Texas, in New Mexico, when the first one was exploded in New Mexico, the word came to me in Potsdam just exactly what had happened. 2 pages on legal type paper, and it was a long, weepy proposition. And I showed it to the members of the cabinet that were there, and I said, now, we're in a shape to win the war without with very few casualties on our side, and we hope not.
During World War II, the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, in August of 1945, more than 5 decades after the First Sino-Japanese War.
Ordnance does not end the war.
It never will.
It ignites the rigs of turmoil.
Canaan, an ancient land in the Near East bordering the Mediterranean, home to the Canaanites, indigenous peoples of the Mediterranean region known as Levant. Canaan was a land pure of foreigners until the Egyptians invaded throughout the Bronze Age. These Egyptians did not leave Canaan until the collapse of this era. And while they may have left, their footprint remained. When they moved out, another moved in. The Palestine, a group of sea peoples originating from the Greek mainland and Aegean islands, such as Crete. These voyagers settled in Canaan and assimilated into the Canaanites. Together, the two groups became the Philistines. was long after, during the Iron Age, when yet another group moved into Canaan. A semi-nomadic pastoral people, Hebrew tribes, under the moniker of Israelites. They took over a large region surrounding the Philistines and formed the Kingdom of Israel, which ere long split into two. Semites is a name given to members of those who speak one of the several Semitic languages. This notably includes Arabs, a group of people originating from the Arabian Peninsula, Akkadians, peoples from the first civilization Mesopotamia, the early inhabitants of Canaan, which includes those Philistines, and northern Canaanite tribes known as Phoenicians. Hebrews, also referred to as Jews, who are the descendants of Israelites, and Arameans, a group of people from the ancient Syrian highlands. All of these groups occupied the Levant at some time. In the surrounding areas, they were divided by landmass and heritage, but this did not stop them from clashing. As depicted by the Hebrew Bible, the Philistines were frequently seen at battle with the Israelites, and during the Mid-Iron Age, the Edomites of Arab origin attacked Israel. On another front, Goliath, a Philistine, and David, an Israelite, had their major conflict, often recounted for centuries. Sometime after, Saul, the king of Israel, was killed in battle by the Philistines, said to have been punished by God. David, the Goliath slayer, would become king, conquer Jerusalem, and make her the capital of the Jewish kingdom. He defeated the Edomites, annexed their land, and fathered many children, including Solomon, who through a long line of descendants passed his genes down to Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Empires, like an autumn man, they fall. Like winter, they decay. And like spring, germinate. Canaan was invaded and conquered by many empires and institutions. Along with the Egyptians, there were the Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, the Persians, Alexander the Great and his forces, the Western Roman Empire, the East Roman Empire, the Rashidun Caliphate, and the Ottoman Empire. Canaan never seemed to remain untouched by foreign hands. The land could not go without labels or distinctions. It's the word Palestine that derives from Philistia, a name given by Greek writers to the land of the Philistines. In the 2nd century AD, the Romans took this word, Palestine, and used it to designate the majority of Israel and surrounding territories. They called the region Syria Palestina. More than just nomenclature, this was a ploy for the Romans to remove any trace of Jewish presence. And after they finally left, the term Palestine would not resurface until much later on. The Romans were not the last to conquer Canaan. In the early 7th century AD, Muslim Arabs took over for the first time. Like every imperial force in this region, the Muslims planted their customs into the land, the Arabs blossomed. Their language, Arabic, became the dominant language, and Islam became the primary religion. Over the centuries, more empires and dynasties took control of Canaan and brought about escapades, crusades, holy wars forged with the sole purpose of stopping the spread of Islam and retaking control of the Holy Land, part of what we call Palestine today. All of this battling and conquering finally ended with the control of the Ottoman Empire, an Islamic political religious state. The Ottomans thrived for hundreds of years, but their dominion shrunk piece by piece until there were no more pieces to peace. In 1916, the United Kingdom, France, the Russian Empire, and the Kingdom of Italy took control over several Ottoman territories. The Ottomans lost Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Palestine. This was the end of a long, gratuitous cycle. An age of empires finally coming to an end. But the sweet apple of hope was far from fruition. Circa 700 BC, the Assyrians conquered Israel and drove out many Hebrew inhabitants, scattering them throughout the Middle East. Circa 600 BC, the Babylonians seized Jerusalem and deported thousands of Judeans, many going to Mesopotamia. Circa 70 AD, the Romans crushed Jerusalem and forced the Jews out of Palestine. For the next thousands of years and centuries, the Jews faced more instances of diaspora. They would expand throughout the entire world. In 1917 and 1918, the Jews finally claimed Palestine as a national home for Jewish people. Yet, the British took control over this region following World War I, and in 1923, a mandate issued by the League of Nations went into effect. This mandate gave the Brits administrative dominance over Palestine, and it included provisions for establishing the region as a Jewish national homeland. The mandate, however, did not go over well with much of the population. Riots ensued throughout the 1920s and 30s. The mandate only exacerbated already steaming tensions between Palestinian Jews and Arabs. In 1937, a report was published, recommended that for the first time, there be a partition separating Canaan into a Jewish and Arab state, with the British retaining administrative control over Nazareth, Bethlehem, and Jerusalem. Aliyah, a word from Hebrew tradition used to describe immigration to Israel. The concept originates from the idea that Israel was promised to the Jewish people by God. In the first Aliyah, from 1881 to 1903, some 25 to 35,000 Jews immigrated to Palestine. In the second, from 1904 to 1914, around 40,000 Jews immigrated to Palestine. In the third, from 1919 to 1923, approximately 40,000 more Jews into Palestine. In the fourth, 1929 to 1939, around 82,000 Jews arrived in Palestine. In the fifth, 1929 to 1939, somewhere between 225,000 and 300,000 Jews surged into Palestine. From 1933 to 1948, the British placed legal restrictions on how many people could enter Palestine. Countless amounts of Jewish people were immigrating in the late 19th century and much of the 20th century, most of them coming from Europe and Russia, or rather, fleeing from pogrom, a Russian word by definition, meaning to wreak havoc, to demolish violently. Synonyms include mass murder, annihilation, extermination, carnage, bloodbath, genocide, ethnic cleansing. '38 AD. Jews were pushed out of the city of Alexandria and blockaded into a Jewish ghetto. Those trying to escape the ghetto were killed, dismembered, and some burnt alive. 1821, the Greeks of Edessa attacked the local Jewish community in what began as an economic dispute. 1881, a large-scale wave of anti-Jewish riots swept through southwestern Imperial Russia. The event that triggered the pogroms was the assassination of Tsar Alexander II, for which some blamed agents of foreign influence. Authorities made no attempts to stop the violence. 1902, a mob in Akshahova attacked Jewish shops, killing 14 Jews and one officer of the Russian military brought to restore order, but was stoned to death by the mob. 1903, an anti-Jewish riot takes place in the Russian Empire, and 49 Jews were killed, over 72 severely wounded, and over 1,500 homes demolished. The New York Times reports on the mob, describing how the general cry, "Kill the Jews," was taken up all over the city. 1905, following a city hall meeting, a mob was drawn into the streets, proclaiming that all Russia's troubles stem from the machinations of the Jews and socialists. 100 Jews were slain. 1929, as a result of hearing reports of Jews massacring Arabs, Arabs attacked Hebron's Jewish quarter, killing between 65 and 68 Jews, but over the course of weeks, 133 in total died. 1938, Kristallnacht. During this program, some 30,000 Jewish males were rounded up and taken into camps against their will. This was the first time Nazi officials made massive arrests against Jews, specifically because they were Jewish. 1939, the White Paper blocked Jewish immigration to Palestine on the eve of World War II. Britain states that for the next 5 years, only 75,000 Jewish immigrants will be able to enter Palestine. After those 5 years, no more Jewish immigration will be permitted unless Palestinian Arabs agreed to it. 1941 to 1945. Final solution. The term final solution of the Jewish question is a euphemism used by Nazi Germany's leaders. These leaders envisioned killing 11 million Jews as a part of their final solution. They succeeded in murdering a mere 6 million. Final solution. The final solution. A final solution.
which has made this victory possible. To work for peace, we can look forward to the greatest age in the history of mankind. That's what we propose to do.
He did what we all must learn to do. You and you and you and you. Duck and cover.
Be sure and remember what Bert the Turtle just did, friends, because every one of us must remember to do the same thing.
In the mid-1900s, it was said that those who ran from death always seemed to lag behind those who danced within the carnage. September 23rd, 1932, Saudi Arabia gained independence. April 17th, 1946, Syria gained independence, nearly 3 years after Lebanon in 1943. May 25th, 1946, Jordan is established. May 14th, 1948, Israel is established. In the 1950s, modern republics formed in Egypt and Iraq. These players set the stage for what is to come. War broke out in 1948. On the eve of May 14th, Arabs launched an air attack on one of Israel's cities and invaded the once former Palestinian mandate. Arab armies from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Egypt all encroached upon Israel. British trained forces from Transjordan eventually intervened, only in areas designated as part of the Arab state. By the end, Egypt and Jordan retained control over the Gaza Strip and West Bank, respectively. More than 6,000 Israeli Jews, including 4,000 soldiers and 2,000 civilians, were killed. more than 10,000 Arab soldiers and civilians were slaughtered. It was 1949 when peace seemed viable. Armistice agreements were signed between Israel, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. However, Iraq and Saudi Arabia never signed any of these agreements with Israel. Agents of foreign influence got further involved in the Levant's affairs. France, Britain, and the United States declared they would not supply any weapons to a state harboring aggressive designs. Things were taking a turn. A law of return was passed in July of 1950, proclaiming every Jew in the world had the right to settle in Israel. Beginning in 1951, Israel would bear an influx of more than 100,000 Jews from Iraq and Iran. The Levant seemed like it was finally coming together. Until July 20th, 1951. King Abdullah I, the first ruler of Jordan, was assassinated at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. There was suspicion that he was in the midst of planning peace talks with Israel. But now, peace was far from reality. Israel offered non-aggression pacts to Arab states in September, calling for direct negotiations and offers of compensation. But, as they say, those who run from death lag behind those who dance within the carnage.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Jordan.
Good evening. Earlier today in Baghdad, the Iraqi president told us that every critical issue in the Middle East was negotiable. And he did not rule out negotiating an end to the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait. The man who conquered Kuwait and who has said in the past that any army trying to dislodge him would be burned by the blood of Iraqi martyrs, said today he did not want war. In fact, he said it over and over again.
Iraq, for its part, sees that the right way to go is the course of peace, and that peace should be comprehensive, complete, and final.
أما على المستوى التفصيلي
But as to details,
فإذا ما أريد أن يكون الحل عربي
if the solution is going to be an Arab solution,
وعند ذلك
and then
يكون من أهم الذين ينبغي أن يجري بينهم حوار مباشر هو العراق والسعودية.
The parties most important to have dialogue between them would be Iraq and Saudi Arabia.
Have you been speaking to one another?
لم نتحدث فيما بيننا.
No, we haven't spoken to one another.
Mr. President, you say that if there's going to be an Arab solution, the important parties to talk are Iraq and Saudi Arabia. But there's an international coalition in Saudi Arabia. If it's to be an international solution, who are the important parties?
شامل في المنطقة.
Towards the achievement of a comprehensive peace in the region.
إذا ما أريد أن يكون الحل دولي.
That is, if the solution is going to be an international one,
هما
then
العراق
these two
والولايات المتحدة.
parties should be Iraq and the United States of America.
زوجات السبعين الموجودة عنده.
Is the American administration planning to see to it that the ruler of Kuwait is married again to another 20 women from the United States, so in addition to the 70 that he already has?
أم يراد له أن يطول عمره في الحكومة النوب مرة أخرى لكي يضيف 60 مليار أخرى إلى الملكية التي يملكها.
Or is it that the United States wants this ruler to continue and live long so that he may add another 60 billion to his personal wealth, from which he took from the wealth of the nation and of the people?
Mr. President, I'm sure you know.
هذا النموذج الذي
This is the kind of example that Mr. Bush is trying to defend.
أليس في هذا فضيحة
Isn't this a
على
scandal
المبادئ الأمريكية
in itself? Isn't this scandalous in itself to the American principles, to the very principles of the United States?
As you say when you do that the United States is imposing preconditions, does that mean that your present position in Kuwait is negotiable?
أنا عندما أقول كلام أقصده.
When I say something, I mean it.
We have received another warning. That is a little warning by Marlon Fitzwater, sort of a presage of the coming of the president. And as soon as everybody sits down and pays attention, Mr. Bush will make his appearance. We don't know what the burden of his message may be today, but it was thought that after he had gone to the Pentagon for a military briefing there, he would have remarks, or perhaps en route. Maybe this is the en route appearance. At any rate, Mr. Bush will have something to say on his own, and then he'll make himself subject to questioning by the White House press corps. Frank?
Well, Reed, it is certainly I think, a given that the president is going to have some weighty thoughts on the subject of Israel's involvement in all of this. And those Scud missiles, how many may remain is really uncertain at this time. I did hear from a senior administration official earlier today that it is feared that Iraq still has at least a dozen operational mobile Scud launchers. That has been the subject of considerable military activity apparently today in the western region of Iraq. The last thing the Bush administration wants to see is, quite frankly, the last thing Israel wants to see, and that is further missile attacks when night falls on Israel tonight.
I have a few opening remarks and then be glad to take a few questions. Let me just get this thing adjusted here. Well, we're now some 37 hours into Operation Desert Storm and the liberation of Kuwait. And so far, so good. U.S. and coalition military forces have performed bravely, professionally, and effectively. It is important, however, to keep in mind two things. First, this effort will take some time. Saddam Hussein has devoted nearly all of Iraq's resources for a decade to building up this powerful military machine. And we can't expect to overcome it overnight, especially as we want to minimize casualties to the U.S. and coalition forces and to minimize any harm done to innocent civilians. And second, we must be realistic. There will be losses. There will be obstacles along the way. And war is never cheap or easy. Our goals have not changed. What we seek is the same as what the international community seeks, namely Iraq's complete and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait and then full compliance with the Security Council resolutions. I also want to say how outraged I am by Iraq's latest act of aggression, in this case against Israel. Once again, we see that no neighbor of Iraq is safe. And I want to state here publicly how much I appreciated Israel's restraint from the outset, really from the very beginning of this crisis. We appreciate what our fighting men and women are doing. This country is united. Yes, there's some protests, but this country is fundamentally united. And I want that message to go out to every kid that is over there serving this country. I saw in the paper a comment by one who worried from seeing demonstrations here and there in this country on television that expressed the will of the country. And so to those troops over there, let me just take this opportunity to say your country is supporting you. The Congress overwhelmingly endorsed that. Let there be no doubt in the minds of any of you, you have the full and unified support of the United States of America.
Mr. President, has the United States asked Israel not to retaliate against Iraq for its attack? What commitments has the United States received in these consultations that we've had with Israel? And how long do you think Israel can stay on the sidelines if these attacks continue?
Well, these questions of what we're talking to Israel about right now, I'm going to keep confidential. No question that Israel's Scud attack, the attack on Israel, was purely an act of terror. It had absolutely no military significance at all, and it was an attack that is symptomatic of the kind of leader that the world is now confronting in Saddam Hussein. And that, again, I repeat, the man that will be defeated here. But Israel has shown great restraint, and I've said that. I think we can all understand that they have their own problems that come from this. But I don't want to go further into it because we are right in the midst of consultations with Israel. I think they, like us, do not want to see this war widened out, and yet they are determined to protect their own population centers. And I can tell you that our defense people are in touch with our commanders to be sure that we are doing the utmost we can to suppress any of these missile sites that might wreak havoc not just on Israel but on other countries that are not involved in this fighting. So I'm going to leave it there, and I am confident that this matter can be resolved.
Mr. President, 2 days ago you launched a war, and war is inherently a two-way street. Why should you be surprised or outraged when there is an act of retaliation?
Against a country that's innocent and is not involved in it? That's what I'm saying.
Well,
Israel is not a participant. Israel is not a combatant. And this man is elected to launch a terroristic attack against the population centers in Israel with no military design whatsoever. And that's why, and it is an outrage, and the whole world knows it, and the whole world is, most of the countries in the world are speaking out against it. There can be no consideration of this in anything other than condemnation.
ortam sağlanacak. Yabancılar, Ankaralılar tarafından Rusya hangi gözle baktıklarını mutlaka merak ediyorlar.
Мне особенно хотелось бы отметить, что эта выставка практически первое культурное событие в жизни Анкары после восстановления наших отношений.
İlişkilerimiz normalleştikten sonra aslında Ankara'da yapılan ilk etkinliktir. Bugün hazır bulunduğumuz sergi.
Уверен, она будет способствовать сближению народов наших стран.
Kesinlikle iki
All right. Any questions? Yeah. You in the back. Wait.
Start from the G.